You are standing in a hall of mirrors, but the reflections are not your own. They are the ghosts of emperors, 1,000 years of them, stretching back into the mists of the Holy Roman Empire. The air in the Hofburg Palace in Vienna is thick with the weight of this lineage, a palpable pressure on the chest. It is the winter of 1867, a year of ghosts. The most recent and most terrible phantom is that of Königgrätz, a battlefield where the dream of Austrian dominance over the German peoples was shattered by the needle guns and precise logistics of the Prussians. You can almost smell the gun smoke on the damask curtains, feel the chill of defeat that no porcelain stove can truly banish. The man who feels this most acutely is the one who rules this phantom empire, Emperor Franz Joseph I. You see him not as a portrait, but as a man. He is young, only 37, but the rigid set of his jaw and the profound weariness in his eyes belong to a much older soul. He is a creature of duty, a prisoner of protocol, a man who believes in the divine right of his house to rule. Yet, the divine seems to have abandoned him. His Italian possessions are lost. His German allies have been humbled. And now, his own house is threatening to splinter from within. The immediate crisis is not Prussian, but Hungarian. You can hear their demands echoing in the cold corridors. The Magyar nobility, sensing weakness, is pushing for the Ausgleich, the compromise. They want their own king, their own parliament, their own army. A dual monarchy. In our world, this is the path Franz Joseph took. He created Austria-Hungary, a sprawling, multi-ethnic behemoth that would limp and creak its way towards Sarajevo. But here, in this reality, the calculus is different. The demands feel more like an ultimatum. The Hungarians are not asking for partnership. They are leveraging defeat to achieve a quiet secession, one that would leave the German-speaking heartland of the empire, Austria, Bohemia, the Tyrol isolated, adrift between a triumphant Prussia and an ever-ambitious Russia. Franz Joseph walks to a vast window overlooking the Michaelplatz. Below, the city of Vienna moves with a life of its own, a jewel of culture and music, the capital of a world that seems to be dissolving. He sees the compromise not as a solution, but as the beginning of the end. To grant the Magyars their wishes is to become an emperor of shreds and patches, to preside over the slow, managed collapse of the German legacy his ancestors built. He would be king in Budapest, yes, but what would he be here in Vienna? The ruler of a German statelet, too weak to stand alone, too proud to kneel. It is in this moment of profound despair that the other path presents itself. It arrives not with trumpets and banners, but in the form of quiet, soberly dressed men from Berlin. They are not the swaggering junkers you might expect. They are diplomats and ministers, men of Otto von Bismarck's new world. They speak not of conquest, but of unification, of destiny. They carry with them a proposal that is both an insult and a salvation, a poisoned chalice, and the only water in the desert. You are in the room as the proposal is laid out on a polished mahogany table. The documents are crisp, the language precise. There is no flowery Habsburg rhetoric. It is the language of industry, of logistics, of realpolitik. Prussia, soon to be the core of a new German empire, does not wish to see its German brothers in Austria cast out into the cold. It does not wish to see Vienna become a vulnerable outpost on the edge of the Slavic world. Instead, it offers a permanent solution. The Grossdeutsche Lösung, the Greater German Solution, the dream of the 1848 revolutionaries, but implemented from the top down, by the very forces that crushed them. The terms are brutally simple. The House of Habsburg will renounce its claim to a separate, sovereign imperial crown. the non-German lands of Cisleithania, Galicia, Dalmatia, Bukovina will be let go, set adrift as principalities and duchies under a loose German protectorate, a buffer zone. Hungary will be granted its independence, left to deal with its own restive minorities without the backing of Austrian arms and industry. And the core, the German-speaking lands Austria proper, the Sudetenland of Bohemia, South Tyrol, and the Burgenland will not be conquered. They will be annexed. They will join the new German Empire, not as a defeated province, but as a constituent kingdom, an archduchy of immense prestige. And Franz Joseph, he will no longer be Emperor of Austria. He will be King Archduke of Austria, a subordinate monarch within the German Reich, just like the kings of Bavaria, Württemberg, and Saxony. He will swear fealty to a new German emperor, the Prussian king, Wilhelm I. He will trade the imperial crown of Austria for a royal one under the imperial crown of Germany. He would be second, but not nothing. His dynasty would survive. His German subjects would be secure within the most powerful nation in Europe, and the Habsburgs would forever be a pillar of the new, united German imperium. You can feel the room grow cold as the implications sink in. To the old guard of the Austrian court, this is unthinkable. It is a surrender more total than any battlefield defeat. It is the end of 700 years of history. They see the portraits of Maria Theresa and Charles V on the walls, and they feel a profound, visceral shame. They argue, they plead. They speak of honor, of tradition, of the unique, cosmopolitan destiny of the Habsburg lands, a bridge between German, Slav, and Magyar. But another voice, a quieter, more pragmatic one, speaks of reality. It speaks of empty treasuries and a demoralized army. It speaks of Russian ambitions in the Balkans and the slow erosion of German influence in the Slavic lands. This path, they argue, is not an end. It is a transformation. It is the only way to preserve the German core. To choose Hungary is to dissolve into a multi-ethnic federation where the Germans are just one voice among many. To choose Germany is to anchor themselves to a future of industrial might, of military security, of national purpose. It is a choice between being the head of a decaying body or a vital organ in a new, powerful one. The decision is not made in a day or a week. It is a slow, agonizing process that stretches from 1867 into the maelstrom of 1870, as Prussia's war with France exposes the weakness of Paris and the awesome power of the German armies. The swift, total victory over Napoleon III is the final argument. It is an undeniable demonstration of the new reality. Germany is the future. Imagine the final moment. It is not in a grand hall, but in a private study. The papers are signed. The Vienna Proclamation is drafted. It is a masterpiece of diplomatic language, speaking of eternal brotherhood, of a shared destiny, of the fulfillment of a historical dream. But behind the words lies the cold, hard fact. The Austrian Empire is dead. Franz Joseph sits at his desk, the pen still in his hand. He has not lost a war. He has conceded history. He has made a choice, not for himself, but for his people, his German people. He has sacrificed the ancient, universalist dream of the Habsburgs on the altar of the modern, nationalist German state. Outside, the news begins to trickle through the city. There is confusion, then shock. For some, it is a betrayal, the final humiliation. For others, a strange sense of relief, of certainty, after years of drift. The bells of St. Stephen's Cathedral begin to ring, but no one is quite sure what they are tolling for. Is it the death of an empire or the birth of an empire? The truth is, It is both. The double eagle of the Habsburgs has consented to fly beneath the single stark eagle of the Hohenzollerns. A crucible has been forged, not of war, but of ink and iron will. A new Germany, a Germany larger, more populous, and more complex than Bismarck himself had ever intended, is about to be born. The world has not yet begun to feel the tremors from this decision, but the tectonic plates of Europe have already shifted, irrevocably. The story of the 20th century has been unwritten, and a new one is about to begin. The year is 1871. The ink on the Treaty of Frankfurt, ending the war with France, is barely dry. In the Hall of Mirrors at Versailles, a place designed to glorify the French Sun King, the German princes have gathered to proclaim a new empire. This much is familiar. But as you watch the scene unfold, the details are jarringly different. Standing near the newly acclaimed Emperor Wilhelm I is not just a sea of Prussian blue and Bavarian cornflower, but a significant contingent in the stark white uniforms of the Austrian court. And among the subordinate monarchs paying homage is Franz Joseph. No longer an emperor in his own right, but the King Archduke of Austria, the highest-ranking vassal of the new Reich. His presence changes everything. It is not just the unification of Germany. It is the merger of two worlds. This is the collision, the eagle and the double eagle. One, the symbol of Prussia, lean, martial, Protestant, efficient, a creature of the cold northern plains. The other, the symbol of the Habsburgs' ancient, Baroque, Catholic, ceremonial, a creature of the Alps and the Danube, steeped in the legacy of the Holy Roman Empire. For centuries they were rivals, two competing visions of what it meant to be German. Now, by a stroke of a pen and the logic of iron, they are bound together. The early years of this union are not a seamless blend, but a jarring, often comical, and deeply tense cultural friction. Imagine Berlin in this era. It is a city of purpose, of barracks and bureaus. The air smells of coal smoke and ambition. The streets are wide, straight, and patrolled by men who walk with a ramrod-straight posture that seems ingrained in their very bones. The language is sharp, clipped, precise. This is Bismarck's Germany, a nation forged in the fires of industry and the discipline of the parade ground. Now, into this city pours a new element, the Austrian aristocracy and bureaucracy. They arrive in Vienna's stead to take their places in the new imperial government, the Reichstag, and the federal ministries. They are a different breed entirely. They bring with them a culture of the salon, of the opera, of intricate court etiquette that seems utterly frivolous to their Prussian counterparts. Where a Prussian official sees a problem to be solved with a directive, an Austrian sees a delicate situation requiring negotiation. A carefully worded letter, and perhaps a private understanding over coffee and Sachertorte. Their German is softer, more melodic. Their Catholicism is not a private matter but a public performance, a fabric of daily life woven with saints' days, festivals, and a casual reverence that the stern Lutherans of the North find baffling, even decadent. You can see the friction in the halls of the new Reichstag building. The Prussian deputies are men of business, industrialists, landowners. They speak of tariffs, production quotas, and railway gauges. The new Austrian deputies, princes of the church, nobles with land titles stretching back to the Crusades. Viennese intellectuals speak of historical rights, of cultural patrimony, of the soul of the nation. When a Prussian speaks of efficiency, the Austrian hears a lack of grace. When an Austrian speaks of tradition, the Prussian hears an excuse for inaction. The military is another flashpoint. The proud Austrian officer corps, with its glorious white uniforms and its aristocratic flair, is now integrated into the German Imperial Army, which is fundamentally the Prussian army writ large. You witness a training exercise on a muddy field outside Potsdam. a Prussian general, a man whose family has served the Hohenzollerns for 200 years, barks orders with the force of a cannon shot. He expects immediate, unquestioning obedience. The Austrian officers, accustomed to a more leisurely pace and a system that valued noble birth as much as martial skill, find this brutal and unsophisticated. A story, perhaps apocryphal, circulates through the beer halls of both capitals. An Austrian colonel, when told by a Prussian superior to take that hill immediately, is said to have replied, "A most excellent suggestion, Herr General. Perhaps we might form a committee to discuss the optimal approach after luncheon." The joke reveals a deeper truth. Two different conceptions of authority are colliding. Even the simple act of governance is a source of conflict. Bismarck, the Iron Chancellor, is a master of the direct approach. He sees a political knot and wishes to sever it with the sword of state power. But he finds his every move complicated by his new countrymen. They are masters of the indirect, the nuanced, the bureaucratic delay. They can stall a decree for months with a flurry of polite objections, procedural questions, and appeals to ancient, half-forgotten treaties. They do not defy him openly. They simply absorb his force, bogging his initiatives down in a morass of Viennese charm and administrative quicksand. He had planned to govern a state. He finds he must now manage a relationship, a vast and complex marriage of convenience between two partners who barely speak the same cultural language. The heart of the new empire now has two competing centers of gravity. Berlin is the political and military capital, the seat of the Kaiser and the Chancellor. But Vienna remains the cultural and social capital. It is the city of Mozart, of Strauss, of magnificent palaces and grand balls. While Berlin builds factories, Vienna builds theatres. The Prussian nobility, feeling the need to keep up, find themselves reluctantly attending operas that last for 5 hours and learning to waltz. The Austrian aristocracy, in turn, finds it must invest in Silesian coal mines and learn about the stock exchange. This cultural collision creates a new kind of German. A young man born in this era might grow up in Munich or Salzburg, attend a university in Heidelberg, but feel the pull of two capitals. He would learn the Prussian reverence for duty and order, but temper it with the Austrian appreciation for Gemütlichkeit, a sense of warmth, coziness, and good cheer. He would be trained in the rigors of German science and engineering, but believe that life was incomplete without art and philosophy. He would be a citizen of an empire that was both a formidable military machine and the world's leading patron of the arts. The Habsburgs themselves navigate this new reality with practiced skill. Franz Joseph, now King Archduke, performs his role as principal vassal with impeccable dignity. He does not challenge Wilhelm's authority, but he cultivates Vienna as a sort of imperial counterweight. To be received at the Hofburg in Vienna becomes, in some circles, a greater social prize than being presented at court in Berlin. The Habsburgs cannot command the legions of the new empire, but they can still command its soul. They host the grandest parties, patronize the most innovative artists, and embody a connection to a deeper, older German history that the upstart Hohenzollerns cannot match. They have lost an empire, but in a strange way, they have cemented their role as the custodians of its culture. This era of friction is not one of weakness. It is a period of immense, if chaotic, energy. The very tension between the two cultures becomes a source of creative power. The Prussian drive for perfection, when applied to the Austrian love of craftsmanship, produces goods of unparalleled quality. The Austrian talent for diplomacy, backed by the might of the Prussian military, gives the new empire a foreign policy that is both subtle and incredibly intimidating. But the most significant consequence of this merger is playing out not in the ballrooms or on the parade grounds, but in the pews of churches and the back rooms of political parties. The annexation of the Austrian lands has brought millions of devout Catholics into a state founded on a Protestant identity. The numbers are stark. In Bismarck's original, smaller Germany, Protestants outnumbered Catholics nearly 2-1. In this new, greater Germany, the populations are nearly equal. This demographic fact is a ticking time bomb placed directly at the foundation of Bismarck's political plans. He is about to launch a culture war, the Kulturkampf, against the Catholic Church, which he sees as a force of divided loyalty. He does not yet realize that in this new Germany, he is no longer fighting a minority. He is about to declare war on half of his own empire. The eagle and the double eagle are locked in an uneasy embrace, and the coming struggle will determine which one truly defines the soul of the new Reich. You are in the chamber of the Reichstag in Berlin in the year 1872. The air is electric with anticipation. Chancellor Otto von Bismarck stands at the rostrum, his presence as solid and imposing as a granite monument. He is a man accustomed to bending history to his will through blood and iron, but today his weapons are words and laws. He is about to launch his masterpiece of domestic policy, the Kulturkampf, the struggle of cultures. In our timeline, this was a decade-long, brutal campaign to subordinate the Catholic Church to the authority of the Prussian-dominated state. It involved expelling religious orders, seizing church property, and jailing priests and bishops who refused to comply. Bismarck saw the Catholic Church, with its allegiance to a pope in Rome, as an ultramontane force, a state within a state, a threat to the unity of his new Protestant-led Reich. He is about to discover that he has fundamentally misread the nation he created. As Bismarck begins to speak, outlining the first of the so-called May Laws, you notice something is wrong. The usual deference, the mixture of fear and respect he commands, is absent. Instead, there is a low murmur, a rustling of papers, a quiet confidence radiating from a section of the chamber that is far larger than he had anticipated. These are not just the delegates of the Catholic Centre Party, which in our world was a perpetual minority. This is a vast, unified bloc. It includes the Centre Party, yes, but now they are joined by dozens of deputies from Austria proper, from the Tyrol, from the Sudetenland. They are reinforced by the staunchly Catholic Bavarians and Rhinelanders, who now see themselves not as isolated minorities, but as part of a mighty southern German Catholic fraternity. You see Ludwig Windthorst, the sharp-witted leader of the Centre Party, not as a lonely warrior fighting a desperate defensive action, but as the field marshal of a confident army. Next to him sits a Prince Archbishop from Salzburg, a man whose family has wielded both spiritual and temporal power for 500 years. He listens to Bismarck's speech, not with alarm, but with a look of weary condescension, as if observing a boorish newcomer commit a profound social faux pas. These men do not see the Pope as a foreign sovereign. They see him as the Holy Father, the spiritual head of their civilization. They do not see their faith as a private matter. They see it as the bedrock of their society, their culture, their very identity, and they have the votes. When Bismarck finishes, the response is not the fragmented opposition he expected. A speaker rises, a nobleman from Vienna, his German elegant and laced with a subtle irony. He does not attack Bismarck's patriotism. Instead, he praises it. He commends the Chancellor's desire for a unified Germany. And then, with surgical precision, he reframes the entire debate. The question, he purrs, is not whether Catholics can be good Germans. The question is whether Germany can be a great nation without embracing the totality of its heritage. He speaks of the Holy Roman Empire, of the Habsburgs who defended Europe from the Ottomans, of the great Catholic universities of Prague and Vienna. He paints a picture of a Germany not defined by the narrow Protestant history of Prussia, but by a 1,000-year tapestry of which Catholicism is the golden thread. He portrays Bismarck's laws not as a defense of the state, but as an attack on the German soul itself, an attempt by one part of the family, the newer, northern part, to disinherit the other. The speech is met with thunderous applause from the southern benches. It is a masterstroke. The Kulturkampf is no longer a matter of state security. It is now a question of identity. Are the Austrians, Bavarians, and Rhinelanders to be treated as second-class citizens in their own home? Is the faith that defines their culture to be branded as suspect? The answer is a resounding no. The political maneuvering that follows is a thing of beauty. The Catholic bloc doesn't just vote no. They form alliances. They find common cause with ethnic minorities, Poles in Galicia, Czechs in Bohemia, who also feel the heavy hand of the centralizing Prussian state. They even court secular liberals who, while wary of the church, are even more terrified of unchecked state power. Bismarck, the master politician, finds himself outmaneuvered. His traditional allies, the national liberals, are hesitant to support a policy that is so obviously alienating half the country and threatening to tear the new empire apart in its infancy. You witness a private meeting between Bismarck and Emperor Wilhelm I. The Kaiser, a devout Protestant himself, is sympathetic to the Chancellor's goals, but he is also a pragmatist. He has just been proclaimed Emperor of all Germans. The reports from the south are troubling. Franz Joseph, the King Archduke in Vienna, has sent a discreet but firm message. His people see this as an attack on their very being. Forcing this issue could provoke a constitutional crisis, a renewal of the very north-south tensions that the unification was supposed to end. Otto, the old Kaiser says, his voice heavy with concern, I am the Emperor of a German Reich, not just a Greater Prussia. We cannot begin our great project by declaring war on half of our subjects. The unforged crown is the crown of this new, multi-confessional Germany. It cannot be forged in the Protestant fires of the Kulturkampf. Bismarck realizes, with a cold fury, that he is trapped. To push forward is to risk shattering the empire. To retreat is to admit defeat. He chooses a third path, strategic withdrawal, disguised as a compromise. The most draconian of the May laws are quietly shelved. The state will maintain oversight of clerical appointments, but the expulsion of religious orders is halted. The imprisonment of clergy ceases. The Kulturkampf does not end with a bang, but with a whimper. It is not defeated in a grand battle. It simply becomes politically unviable, an impossible project from its inception. The consequences are immediate and profound. The first is the empowerment of the Catholic Centre Party, which now allied with the Austrians and other Southerners, becomes a permanent and powerful force in the Reichstag. They are no longer a party of opposition but a party of government, a kingmaker in any future coalition. They will act as a permanent brake on Prussian centralism and militarism. The second consequence is a fundamental shift in the empire's identity. It is now officially, undeniably, a dual confessional state. The Protestant, Prussian character is still strong, but it is no longer absolute. The nation's self-image must now make room for the traditions, holidays, and social values of its Catholic half. This forces a new kind of tolerance, not from idealism, but from necessity. The state cannot afford to alienate such a massive portion of its own population. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, the failure of the Kulturkampf prevents the deep alienation of German Catholics that occurred in our timeline. In our world, the Kulturkampf left a lasting scar, making many Catholics feel like outsiders in their own country. a suspicion that lingered for generations. In this timeline, that wound is never inflicted. Catholics, and especially the newly incorporated Austrians, see the outcome as a victory. It proves that they can be both devoutly Catholic and fully German, that their voice matters, that the new empire belongs to them as much as it does to the Prussians. The unforged crown remains a symbol of this new reality, a single imperial authority resting on two distinct, powerful, and now inseparable pillars of faith. Bismarck had intended to build a nation of steel. He has been forced, against his will, to build one of stone and stained glass as well. The internal balance of power in Germany has been permanently altered before the empire is even 5 years old. While the great debates over culture and faith echo through the marbled halls of the Reichstag in Berlin, you must now turn your gaze to the periphery, to the lands that were cut away from the old Austrian Empire. Here, on the new eastern and southern frontiers of the German Reich, a different and more dangerous story is unfolding. This is the shattered periphery, a mosaic of new states and old resentments, a zone of instability that exists as a direct consequence of the Vienna Proclamation. In freeing itself of its non-German burdens, the new Germany has inadvertently created a political vacuum, and as you watch, you can see the great powers of Europe begin to circle, their shadows falling across these vulnerable newborn nations. First, journey to the plains of Hungary. Budapest is a city in the throes of a feverish national dream. Having finally achieved the independence they craved for centuries, the Magyar elite are in a state of euphoria. They are building a grand capital on the Danube, a rival to Vienna. They are codifying the Magyar language, reviving national myths, and asserting their dominance with the passion of a people who feel their time has finally come. But this passion has a dark side. The Kingdom of Hungary is not a homogeneous nation. Within its borders live millions of Slovaks, Romanians, Croats, and Serbs. In the days of the Habsburgs, Vienna often acted as a check on Magyar ambitions, playing the minorities off against the Hungarian nobility to maintain a balance of power. Now, that check is gone. You are in a provincial town in Croatia, nominally part of the lands of the Crown of St. Stephen. The new laws from Budapest are being read out in the town square. Hungarian is now the sole language of government and education. Croatian officials are being replaced by Magyar appointees. The local Croatian flag is to be flown only beneath the larger Hungarian tricolour. You see the faces in the crowd. There is no joy here, only a sullen, simmering anger. These are the people who, for centuries, served as the military frontier for the Habsburgs, the Militärgrenze. They saw themselves as loyal soldiers of the emperor. They do not see themselves as subjects of the Magyars. In a small, smoke-filled coffee house, men speak in hushed tones of Illyrianism, of a union of the South Slavs. They look across the border to the small but fiercely independent kingdom of Serbia, and they begin to dream dangerous dreams. Hungary, in achieving its own national aspirations, has lit a dozen nationalist fuses within its own borders. Lacking the industrial might and financial resources of its former Austrian partner, it has no easy way to manage the coming crises. Now, move north to Prague, the capital of the new protectorate of Bohemia. It is not an independent kingdom, but a statelet under German protection, its foreign policy and military affairs ultimately subject to Berlin's approval. The Czechs, like the Hungarians, are experiencing a national revival, but theirs is a frustrated one. They have their own diet, their own language, but they live in the shadow of the colossal German Empire, of which their Sudetenland brethren are now a fully integrated part. You walk the winding streets of the old town, past the magnificent astronomical clock. You hear the passionate speeches in the new national theatres, celebrating the legacy of Jan Hus and the glories of the Bohemian kingdom. There is a fierce pride here, but also a deep sense of claustrophobia. They are trapped. They cannot challenge Germany directly. So their anger turns inward against the remaining German-speaking population of Prague, and their hopes turn outward toward the east. In a dimly lit salon, you see Czech intellectuals and politicians meeting with a man from the Russian embassy. He is officially a cultural attaché, a lover of Slavic music and literature. But his words are not about culture. He speaks of pan-Slavism, of the destiny of the Slavic peoples to unite under the benevolent protection of their great brother, Mother Russia. He offers scholarships for Czech students to study in St. Petersburg. He provides funds to nationalist newspapers that publish fiery editorials against German influence. Russia is playing a long game. It cannot challenge Germany militarily, not yet. But it can sow discord on its borders. It can nurture grievances, support nationalist movements, and turn this shattered periphery into a constant draining problem for Berlin. Bohemia, in its gilded cage, is becoming the westernmost front in a new, cold war between Teuton and Slav. Further east, you find the Principality of Galicia, with its combustible mix of Poles and Ukrainians. Formerly a Habsburg crown land, it is now another vulnerable statelet in Germany's sphere of influence. For the Polish nobility in Lemberg and Krakow, this is a disaster. Their dream has always been the restoration of an independent Poland. They had hoped to play Vienna off against St. Petersburg. Now, Vienna is gone, and they are caught between a Germany that has no interest in Polish independence and a Russia that actively suppresses it in its own territories. For the Ukrainians, or Ruthenians, the situation is even more complex. They have long resented Polish dominance. Now they see an opportunity. Agents from both Berlin and St. Petersburg quietly approach Ukrainian leaders, offering support, promising autonomy, hoping to use them as a wedge to destabilize the region for their own purposes. Galicia is not a nation. It is a battleground of competing nationalisms, a wound on the map of Europe that refuses to heal. And finally, to the south, in the chaotic Bosnian condominium, it is a land that belongs to no one and everyone. Nominally, a neutral zone overseen by Germany, Hungary, and the Ottoman Empire, it is in practice a lawless frontier. You see German industrialists surveying for coal deposits, Hungarian administrators trying to collect taxes, and the remnants of Ottoman authority fading into irrelevance. And amongst the Orthodox Serb, Catholic Croat, and Muslim Bosniak populations, you see the stirrings of the conflicts that will define the coming century. Serbian nationalists, funded by Belgrade, preach unification. Croatian priests dream of a greater Catholic kingdom. The old Ottoman beys watch their power evaporate and wonder which new master to serve. This entire shattered periphery is a tinderbox. It is the direct, messy consequence of the clean, decisive act of German unification. Germany, in absorbing its Austrian core, has secured its own power, but has also created a permanent arc of crisis on its borders. It is a zone of weak states, ethnic strife, and the proxy battles of great powers. The old, clumsy, multi-ethnic Habsburg Empire, for all its faults, had acted as a container for these tensions. Now the container is broken, and its contents have spilled across the map of Central and Eastern Europe. The German Empire is strong, yes, but it is now tied to this region of chaos. It will be forced to intervene, to mediate, to police this periphery, spending blood and treasure to manage the very problems it had sought to excise. The peace of Europe now depends on Germany's ability to control this beautiful, volatile, and deeply troubled inheritance. The year is 1888. 17 years have passed since the proclamation of the German Empire. A generation has come of age, knowing nothing but this new reality. The old emperor, Wilhelm I, is gone, as is his son, the promising but tragically short-lived Frederick III. A new Kaiser sits on the throne, the young, ambitious, and often impetuous Wilhelm II. In our timeline, this year marked the beginning of the end for Otto von Bismarck, who would be dismissed by the young Kaiser just 2 years later, unleashing a more aggressive and erratic German foreign policy. But here, the political landscape is profoundly different. The forces, set in motion by the union with Austria, are about to culminate in a political earthquake that will forever shift the empire's center of gravity. You are back in the Reichstag, but the atmosphere has changed. The raw friction of the early years has settled into a complex but stable working relationship. The Catholic bloc, a fusion of the German Centre Party and the Austrian Christian Socials, is no longer an opposition force. It is the largest and most disciplined political entity in the nation. For years, they have been the indispensable junior partners in Bismarck's governing coalitions, trading their support for concessions on education, social policy, and a steady flow of imperial investment into the southern states. Bismarck, the old Prussian lion, has learned to live with them, a constant, irritating check on his authority. But he is old now, tired, and increasingly out of step with the times. The Germany he governs is no longer the Prussia writ large he had envisioned. The catalyst for change is an economic crisis. A downturn in global trade, coupled with a series of poor harvests, has hit the agricultural regions of the south and east particularly hard. There is social unrest, strikes in the industrial cities of Bohemia, and a growing sense that the government in Berlin is too focused on the needs of northern industrialists and exporters. The Social Democrats, a rising force, are gaining support among the urban proletariat. The ruling coalition, a fragile alliance of Bismarck's conservatives and the National Liberals, is fraying. A vote of no confidence is called, and for the first time in the history of the Reich, the government falls. The young Kaiser Wilhelm II is faced with a crisis. His instincts, like those of his grandfather, are autocratic and Prussian. He wants to appoint another Junker, another man of iron, to lead the government. But his advisers, and indeed the political arithmetic, tell him this is impossible. Any new government requires a majority in the Reichstag, and that majority cannot be formed without the great Catholic bloc. For weeks, the nation is gripped by a political stalemate. Berlin is filled with rumours as party leaders shuttle between the Reichstag and the royal palace. You are privy to the decisive meeting. The Kaiser has summoned Ludwig Windthorst, the elder statesman of the Centre Party, and his Austrian counterpart, a smooth, aristocratic Viennese politician named Karl Lueger. They enter the Kaiser's study, a room dominated by portraits of Prussian military heroes. The contrast is stark. The Kaiser is in full military uniform, radiating a nervous energy. The two Catholic leaders are in sober civilian dress, calm and implacably patient. They have spent their entire careers preparing for this moment. The Kaiser, dispensing with pleasantries, demands to know their price for supporting a new conservative chancellor. Windthorst, his eyes twinkling with cunning, gives a simple answer. Their support is not for sale. They will not prop up another Prussian-led government that treats them as a junior partner. They represent nearly half the empire. They have the largest, most stable block of votes. They demand the chancellorship itself. They propose a candidate, Georg von Hertling, a Bavarian count, a distinguished philosopher and a devout Catholic. You can feel the shock in the room. A Catholic chancellor? A Bavarian chancellor? Appointed by a Prussian king-emperor? The idea is revolutionary. It goes against everything the Hohenzollern dynasty and the Prussian state stand for. Wilhelm II paces the room, his anger palpable. He speaks of tradition, of the Prussian army as the bedrock of the state, of the Protestant faith of his ancestors. He sees this as a power grab, an attempt by the South to usurp the rightful authority of the North. But Karl Lueger, the Austrian, speaks next. His tone is not demanding but persuasive, almost seductive. He speaks to the Kaiser's vanity and his fears. He points out that the socialists are the real threat, the godless revolutionaries who would destroy the monarchy and the church alike. Who better to fight them, he asks, than a government grounded in the Christian faith of the common people? He speaks of a new vision for the empire, not as a Prussian conquest, but as a true synthesis of North and South. A Catholic chancellor, he argues, would not weaken the empire but strengthen it by fully and finally winning the loyalty of the southern Germans. It would show the world that the German Reich was a mature, inclusive state, not a mere military junta. He even subtly hints that with the South fully on board, the Kaiser's own pet projects, like building a great imperial navy, might find much more generous funding in the Reichstag. The argument continues for days, but the logic is inescapable. The Kaiser cannot rule without a parliamentary majority. The only majority is a Catholic-led one. To refuse is to prolong the crisis, to empower the socialists, and to reveal the imperial constitution as unworkable. Finally, reluctantly, with a heavy heart and a sense that the world is being turned upside down, Wilhelm II agrees. He dismisses Otto von Bismarck, sending the architect of the First German Reich into a bitter retirement. And in his place, he appoints Count Hertling. The news is a bombshell. In the beer halls of Munich, Salzburg, and Cologne, there is jubilation. In the conservative gentlemen's clubs of Berlin and Königsberg, there is despair and a sense of betrayal. The appointment of a Catholic chancellor is more than a change in personnel. It is a paradigm shift. The political and cultural centre of gravity of the German Empire, for so long anchored in Berlin, begins an inexorable drift southward. The policies of the new government reflect this change immediately. The remnants of the Kulturkampf laws are formally repealed. Catholic religious orders are welcomed back. The state increases funding for education in the southern states. But the most significant shift is in tone. The new government's pronouncements are filled with references to Christian social teaching, to the importance of family, faith, and community. It is a more paternalistic, more traditionalist, and in some ways, a more compassionate vision of the state than Bismarck's cold realpolitik. It is a government that seeks to build social cohesion not through iron, but through a shared Christian identity. This has a profound effect on the empire's internal culture. The Prussian, Protestant, militaristic identity is still immensely powerful, but it is no longer the only identity. It now has to share the stage with a southern, Catholic, more culturally focused vision of Germanness. The state is no longer seen as just a machine for projecting power, but also as a guardian of faith and culture. The appointment of the Catholic Chancellor is the moment the crucible of the German-Austrian Union yields its first transformative result. The two metals, forced together in 1871, have begun to form a new alloy, one with properties that neither possessed on its own. The consequences of this new political chemistry will soon be felt far beyond Germany's borders. The sun beats down on the dusty hills surrounding Jerusalem. It is the late 1890s, a decade since the political revolution in Berlin, that saw the rise of the first Catholic Chancellor. The shift in power from the Protestant North to the Catholic South was not just a domestic affair. It has begun to radiate outwards, fundamentally altering Germany's posture in the world. The new government, deeply influenced by its Austrian and Bavarian constituents, possesses a different set of historical memories and geopolitical priorities than the Prussia of Otto von Bismarck. Where Bismarck saw only the cold calculus of the European balance of power, the new leadership sees a wider world suffused with faith, history, and a sense of Christian destiny. Their gaze now falls upon the decaying Ottoman Empire, the sick man of Europe, and specifically upon the Holy Land. You are with a German delegation arriving at the port of Jaffa. This is not a military expedition. The men disembarking are not soldiers in spiked helmets, but engineers in linen suits, archaeologists with leather-bound notebooks, and priests in sober cassocks. They are led by a man named Matthias Erzberger, a prominent deputy from the Centre Party, a devout Catholic with a keen sense of history and a pragmatist's understanding of power. This delegation represents the new face of German foreign policy. Less about conquest, more about influence, infrastructure, and a concept the Ottomans find both alluring and alarming protection. For centuries, France had claimed the title of Protector of the Christians in the Levant. It was a useful diplomatic tool, a justification for intervention, and a source of national prestige. But the France of the Third Republic is an aggressively secular state, often openly hostile to the Catholic Church at home. This creates a vacuum. The new government in Berlin, guided by its powerful Catholic bloc and egged on by its Austrian members who carry the Habsburg legacy of being the historic defenders of Christendom, sees a golden opportunity. Germany, the most powerful nation in Europe, will become the new protector of the holy places. The process is a masterpiece of soft power. It begins not with threats, but with investments. You witness German engineers, funded by a consortium of Deutsche Bank and the Vatican Bank, presenting plans to the Ottoman governor. They propose to build a modern railway line from Jaffa to Jerusalem, to pave the roads, to construct hospitals and hospices for Christian pilgrims. They offer generous loans to the indebted Ottoman government to finance these projects. The Sultan in Constantinople, Abdul Hamid II, is deeply suspicious. But he is also desperate. His empire is crumbling, his treasury is empty. The German offer is too good to refuse. He grants the concessions. Soon, the land begins to change. The clang of German steel echoes in the Judean hills as railroad tracks are laid. German becomes a common language in the marketplaces, spoken by engineers and foremen. The new St. Louis French Hospital in Jerusalem is a marvel of modern medicine, but it is funded by German Catholic charities and staffed by German-speaking nuns. The project is a resounding success, making the pilgrimage to Jerusalem safer and easier than ever before. Pilgrims from across the Christian world, especially from Germany, Austria, and Italy, flock to the region, and they see German efficiency and German charity at every turn. The next step is more delicate. The delegation, now with enormous local prestige, begins to mediate the endless, bitter disputes between the various Christian denominations over the holy sites themselves. For centuries, the Franciscans, Greek Orthodox, and Armenian Christians have brawled over every candle and stone in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. The Ottoman authorities have maintained a fragile, often cynical, peace. Now, the German consul, a man of immense patience and backed by the economic might of his empire, steps in. He doesn't impose solutions. He arbitrates. He funds repairs to a chapel for one group, secures a property right for another. Slowly, methodically, Germany becomes the indispensable guarantor of the status quo. You are in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre on Easter Sunday. The air is thick with incense and the ancient chants of a dozen languages. You see the German consul, a place of honor reserved for him near the aedicule. He is not a ruler, but his presence ensures the peace. The Franciscan monks, whose order is historically strong in southern Germany and Austria, look to him with gratitude. The other denominations, while wary, know that he is a more honest broker than the corrupt Ottoman officials. The final move comes during a state visit. Kaiser Wilhelm II, at the urging of his government, travels to the Holy Land. In our timeline, he made this trip, but it was largely a symbolic gesture. In this timeline, it is the culmination of a decade of careful policy. He enters Jerusalem not as a conqueror, but as a pilgrim and a protector. He meets with the Sultan, and in a grand ceremony, a treaty is signed. It is not a treaty of annexation. It is a treaty of eternal friendship and protection. Germany formally assumes the role of protector of its Christian citizens and institutions within the Ottoman Empire, and is recognized as the primary mediating power for all Christian holy sites. The treaty establishes a special administrative zone, a corpus separatum for Jerusalem and Bethlehem, to be governed by a council of Ottoman officials and the consuls of the great European powers, but with the German consul acting as the permanent chairman. It is, in effect, a German protectorate in all but name. France protests furiously, but its position is weak. It cannot match German influence on the ground. Russia, the traditional protector of the Orthodox Christians, is outmaneuvered. It has been focused on stirring up trouble among the Slavs in the Balkans and has neglected the Levant. It can only watch as Germany, using the leverage of its Catholic population, co-opts the Orthodox desire for security and stability. The consequences are enormous. Germany has leapfrogged its colonial rivals to establish a major foothold in the Middle East without firing a single shot. This is not a colony in the British or French sense, a territory to be exploited for its raw materials. It is a protectorate of prestige, a demonstration of Germany's unique role as a modern industrial power that also takes faith and history seriously. This German Jerusalem becomes a source of immense national pride, especially in the Catholic South. It reinforces the idea that the union with Austria has not just made Germany bigger, but has given it a soul, a historical mission beyond mere power politics. For the declining Ottoman Empire, it is another nail in the coffin, a cession of sovereignty that it is powerless to prevent. For the nascent Zionist movement, it presents a complex new reality. They now must conduct their negotiations for Jewish settlement not just with a weak Ottoman government, but with a powerful and deeply entrenched German presence, one that sees the land through the lens of Christian history. This new foreign policy, born from the internal political shift detailed in the previous chapter, has projected a new kind of German power onto the world stage. The empire is demonstrating that it can achieve its strategic goals not just with armies, but with banks, engineering firms, and diplomatic missions guided by a sense of cultural and religious purpose. The eagle of Prussia and the double eagle of the Habsburgs are learning to hunt together, and their chosen prey is the vast, vulnerable inheritance of the Ottoman Empire. The turn of the century, 1900. The world is accelerating, powered by steam and electricity, bound together by telegraph cables, and the hulls of great ships. The great powers of Europe are locked in a frantic race for empire, carving up Africa and Asia, seeking markets, resources, and above all, prestige. In Berlin, this global frenzy forces a great and defining debate within the halls of government. A debate that exposes the fundamental fault line running through the heart of the German Reich. It is the clash of two imperial visions, a choice between the sea and the land, between the Prussian past and the Austro-Bavarian future. It is the debate over the continental imperative. On one side stands the Kaiser, Wilhelm II, and with him the powerful industrialists of the Rhineland and the traditional Prussian naval command, You see them in a smoke-filled room in the naval office. Charts of the world's oceans spread across a massive table. Grand Admiral von Tirpitz, the architect of the high seas fleet in our timeline, is making his case. He points to the sprawling British Empire, a colossus built on sea power. He points to the new American and Japanese navies. A great nation, he argues, a nation of Germany's industrial might and global ambition, requires a great fleet. Weltpolitik world policy demands colonies overseas, coaling stations across the globe, and a navy capable of challenging the Royal Navy itself. It is the classic Prussian vision of power projection: direct, competitive, and martial. The industrialists agree, dreaming of captive markets in Africa and the Pacific, secured by the guns of German battleships. The Kaiser, obsessed with the sea and consumed by a jealous rivalry with his British cousins, is the policy's most ardent champion. On the other side stands the governing coalition, the powerful Catholic bloc, now a mature and deeply entrenched political force. Their vision is entirely different. You are in a quieter, more ornate room in a ministry building on the Wilhelmstrasse, a room that feels more like a Viennese salon than a Prussian bureau. The Chancellor, a successor to Hertling, is there, along with leaders from the Centre Party and the Austrian Christian Socials. They are looking at a different map, not a map of the world, but a map of Europe and the Near East. Their fingers trace the path of the Danube River, the rail lines snaking through the Balkans, the ancient trade routes leading to Constantinople and Baghdad. A banker from Munich, a man whose firm has financed railways in Bohemia and lumber mills in Galicia, lays out their argument. Why? He asks. Should we spend billions on a fleet to challenge the British in a game they have perfected over 300 years? Why should we fight for scraps of jungle in Africa when the richest, most underdeveloped land in the world lies at our very doorstep? He speaks of the Balkans, of Anatolia, of Mesopotamia. These are not distant, malaria-ridden lands. They are contiguous, accessible by rail. They do not require a massive fleet to control, only capital, engineers, and shrewd diplomacy. An Austrian nobleman, a man whose family once fought the Turks at the gates of Vienna, builds on the theme. He speaks not of colonies, but of spheres of influence. He evokes the old Habsburg dream of a Danubian empire, but reimagined for the industrial age. Germany, he argues, should not seek to conquer these lands politically. It should dominate them economically. It should build their railways, finance their governments, modernize their agriculture. It should create a vast, integrated economic zone, a Mittel Europa stretching from the North Sea to the Persian Gulf, all of it powered by German industry and organized by German finance. This is a land-based colonial empire, an empire of infrastructure and economic dependency. It is subtle, less overtly aggressive than the Kaiser's naval ambitions, but far grander in its ultimate scope. This is the Continental imperative. The debate is not merely strategic, it is cultural. The naval policy is seen by the Southerners as a purely Prussian obsession, a costly and dangerous vanity project that risks a direct confrontation with Great Britain. They see it as a distraction from the real work of consolidating Germany's position in the heart of Europe. The land-based strategy, in turn, is viewed by the Prussian elite as timid and parochial. They mock it as a shopkeeper's empire, lacking in the heroic, martial glory that a great nation requires. The struggle plays out in the Reichstag, in the press, and in the private chambers of the palace. The Kaiser and the naval lobby push hard for their fleet. They fund patriotic navy leagues. They publish articles extolling the virtues of sea power, but the Catholic-led government controls the budget. They hold the power of the purse, and they are masters of parliamentary procedure. They approve funds for a few new cruisers, enough to appease the Kaiser's pride, but they refuse to authorize the massive battleship building program that Tirpitz demands. The dream of a German high seas fleet to rival Britain's is starved in its cradle. Instead, the government directs the immense financial and industrial power of the Reich eastward and southward. The most spectacular manifestation of this policy is the Berlin to Baghdad Railway. In our timeline, this was a project fraught with diplomatic tension and financial difficulty. In this timeline, it is the central strategic project of the German state. It is funded by a massive consortium of German and Austrian banks. German engineers designed the bridges and tunnels that cross the rugged Taurus Mountains. The steel for the rails is forged in the Ruhr and in the great foundries of Bohemia. You stand on a windswept plateau in Anatolia, watching a German steam locomotive pull a long train of freight cars, a steel serpent in an ancient landscape. This railway is more than a transportation route. It is an artery of empire. Along its path spring up German settlements, trading posts, and technical schools. German geologists discover vast oil deposits around Mosul and Kirkuk, and the railway provides the means to transport it. The Ottoman Empire, in exchange for the railway, grants German companies exclusive mineral rights and oil concessions. Germany is not seizing territory, but it is taking control of the Ottoman economy, piece by piece. The Continental imperative also transforms the shattered periphery. The weak statelets of the Balkans and Central Europe are drawn ever deeper into Germany's economic orbit. Hungarian wheat, Romanian oil, and Serbian copper all flow north on German-built railways, feeding the Reich's industrial machine. In return, these countries are flooded with German-manufactured goods, their local industries unable to compete. Their governments are propped up by German loans, their armies are trained by German officers. They are not colonies, but they are no longer truly independent. This choice to prioritize land over sea has monumental consequences. First, it averts the naval arms race with Great Britain. The British, while wary of Germany's growing economic dominance in the East, do not see it as a direct, existential threat, in the same way they viewed the high seas fleet. There is friction, but not the mortal antagonism that defined the years leading to 1914 in our world. The German menace, for London, is a commercial rival, not a military one poised to strangle the British Isles. Second, it solidifies the cultural and political identity of the Reich. The success of the Continental imperative is a victory for the Austro-Bavarian vision. It proves that there is another path to greatness, one that does not rely on Prussian militarism. The heroes of this empire are not admirals but engineers, bankers, and diplomats. This further shifts the empire's centre of gravity south and east, away from the North Sea and towards the Danube and the Bosphorus. Germany is turning its back on the Atlantic world and focusing its immense energies on creating a vast, contiguous Eurasian sphere of influence. It is a quieter, more insidious form of empire building, but no less profound in its impact on the course of history. You are in Paris, in a lavishly decorated office at the Quai d'Orsay, the French Foreign Ministry. The year is 1905. A heavy silence hangs in the air, a silence filled with the ghosts of lost provinces and the sting of past humiliations. Théophile Delcassé, the fiery French foreign minister, is meeting with the Russian ambassador Alexander Izvolsky. In our timeline, this was an era of buoyant confidence for the Franco-Russian alliance. It was a powerful counterweight to the German-led Triple Alliance, a guarantee that if war came, Germany would face a dreaded two-front conflict. The French army was resurgent, Russian manpower seemed infinite. War was not only thinkable. For many, it was inevitable, and even desirable. But in this room, in this timeline, the mood is not one of confidence. It is one of profound, grim resignation. The map on the wall tells the story. It is a new map, one that shows a single, monolithic block of grey, stretching from the Rhine to the borders of Galicia, from the Baltic Sea to the Adriatic. This is the German Reich. The ambassador has just returned from Berlin, and his report is chilling. He speaks not of troop movements or aggressive rhetoric, but of numbers, cold, hard, and indisputable. He lays a document on the polished desk. It is a census report. The population of the German Empire is approaching 90 million people. France, by contrast, has a stagnant population of barely 40 million. The Russian Empire is vast, yes, but its population is overwhelmingly rural, illiterate, and scattered across a continent with a primitive rail network. Germany's population is educated, urbanized, and concentrated in the industrial heart of Europe. Another document follows, an economic assessment. Germany's industrial output, its production of steel, coal, and chemicals, is not just greater than France's. It is greater than that of France and Russia combined. The German railway network is a dense, ruthlessly efficient web, capable of moving millions of men to any border within a matter of days. The Russian ambassador speaks of the new Berlin to Baghdad railway, a project nearing completion. He describes it as a strategic spine, an artery that allows German influence and material to flow unimpeded into the Near East, an area Russia has always coveted. The conversation turns to military matters. The French General Staff has run the war games, the simulations, over and over again. Every scenario ends in disaster. The old French plan, Plan 17, a fantasy of a headlong offensive into the lost provinces of Alsace-Lorraine, is now seen as suicidal. It would be a charge not against an army, but against a continent. The German army can field a force so large, so well equipped, and so rapidly mobilized that it could realistically hold the French at bay in the west with a fraction of its strength, while using the bulk of its might to deliver a crushing blow against Russia. Then, at its leisure, it could turn its full attention back to the west. The Schlieffen plan of our world is unnecessary. There is no need for a desperate gamble when you possess overwhelming, crushing force. You can see the despair in Delcasse's eyes. The dream that has sustained French politics for over 30 years, the dream of revenge for the defeat of 1870, is dying in this room. The numbers do not lie. A war against Germany is no longer a risk. It is a certainty of national annihilation. The absorption of the Austrian lands in 1871 has done more than just add population and territory to Germany. It has created a state that is not just a great power, but a hyperpower. A hegemon that has fundamentally broken the European balance of power. It has multiplied Germany's strength, while the dissolution of the Austro-Hungarian Empire has removed a key, if dysfunctional, ally for a potential anti-German coalition. This new reality forces a complete strategic rethink in both Paris and St. Petersburg. The Franco-Russian alliance, once an offensive pact in all but name, is transformed into something entirely different. It becomes a purely defensive containment strategy. Its purpose is no longer to prepare for a war to defeat Germany, but to create a deterrent so formidable that Germany will have no incentive to attack them. It is a strategy of survival, not of victory. You travel to St. Petersburg, to the grand, draughty halls of the Winter Palace. Tsar Nicholas II is meeting with his ministers. The mood is equally somber. The humiliation of the recent Russo-Japanese war has exposed the profound weaknesses of the Russian state. Now, they look west, and they see a neighbor that makes the Japanese look like a minor provincial power. The pan-Slavist ambitions of dominating the Balkans and seizing Constantinople from the Ottomans now seem like fanciful delusions. Every move they might make in the Balkans is now shadowed by the reality of German power. You travel to St. Petersburg, to the grand, draughty halls of the Winter Palace. Tsar Nicholas II is meeting with his ministers. The mood is equally somber. The humiliation of the recent Russo-Japanese war has exposed the profound weaknesses of the Russian state. Now, they look west, and they see a neighbor that makes the Japanese look like a minor provincial power. The pan-Slavist ambitions of dominating the Balkans and seizing Constantinople from the Ottomans now seem like fanciful delusions. Every move they might make in the Balkans is now shadowed by the reality of German power. Germany's economic dominance over the region, as established by the Continental imperative, means that any Russian-backed Serbian or Bulgarian move could be met with crippling German economic sanctions long before a single shot is fired. And if it came to war, the German army could be at the gates of Warsaw in a fortnight. The calculation is clear. Russia cannot risk a direct confrontation. Its strategy must shift from expansion to consolidation. It must focus on internal reforms, on building its own industries, on quelling the revolutionary unrest that is simmering just beneath the surface of its society. The great game against Britain in Central Asia continues, but the great game in Europe is over. Germany has won. This new strategic calculus, this Franco-Russian calculation, has a profound pacifying effect on European diplomacy. The endless series of colonial crises that brought the great powers to the brink of war in our timeline are diffused. When the Moroccan crisis erupts in 1906, Germany's position is so unassailable that it has no need for the Kaiser's belligerent posturing. Its demands for commercial access are met with little resistance because France knows it cannot risk a conflict over it. There is no Algeciras conference to humiliate Germany. There is only quiet, grudging acceptance of the new reality. The very atmosphere of the continent changes. The fatalistic sense of an impending, apocalyptic war begins to fade, replaced by a sullen acceptance of German hegemony. The arms race does not end, but its character changes. France and Russia no longer build their armies with the goal of matching Germany's, an obviously impossible task. Instead, they invest in fortifications, a vast line of fortresses on the French border, a series of defensive works in Russian Poland. Their military posture becomes entirely reactive. For Germany, this reality is a golden age. It faces no credible military threat. Its neighbors are contained. Its economic sphere of influence is secure and expanding. It can afford to focus its immense energies on science, culture, and social development. The leaders in Berlin, now from the less militaristic southern tradition, are not inclined to military adventurism anyway. They have achieved their goals without a major war. Their primary foreign policy challenge is not preparing for a great conflict, but managing their vast, informal empire and dealing with the low-level, chronic instability in the Balkans. The world of 1900, which in our history was a powder keg, waiting for a spark, has become something else entirely. It is a stable, if profoundly unequal system. The balance of power is gone, replaced by a pyramid with Germany sitting firmly at the top. The Franco-Russian calculation is a calculation of impotence. The tragedy of a great war has been averted, but it has been replaced by the quiet, enduring frustration of living in the shadow of an unconquerable giant. You are walking through the grounds of the Charlottenburg Palace in Berlin, but it is not the stiff, formal court of the Hohenzollerns you might imagine. The year is 1910. The long peace, secured by Germany's unchallengeable might, has turned the empire's immense energies inward. The cultural friction you witnessed in the 1870s, the jarring collision of Prussian efficiency and Viennese grace, has had a full generation to blend and evolve. The result is not a victory for one side or the other, but a true synthesis, a new and startlingly potent form of German culture that is now the envy and the talk of the world. This is the fruit of the crucible, the symbiosis of steel and spirit. The first and most visible manifestation of this is in the physical world in architecture and design. The old Prussian style was neoclassical, monumental, and severe, designed to project state power. The Austrian style was Baroque and Rococo, ornate, and designed to celebrate life and faith. The new style, which critics are calling Reich modern, is a fusion of the two. You see a new university library being built. Its underlying structure is of pure steel, a marvel of Prussian engineering, with vast open spaces and enormous glass windows designed for maximum efficiency. But this steel skeleton is not left bare. It is clad in warm sandstone, adorned with elegant but restrained sculptural details that evoke historical themes. The interior reading rooms are not stark halls but are panelled in rich Austrian walnut, with comfortable leather chairs and gracefully curved lighting fixtures. It is a building that is both ruthlessly functional and deeply humane. It has the strength of Berlin and the soul of Vienna. This philosophy extends to industrial products. German manufacturing, once known merely for being durable and efficient, now acquires a reputation for elegance and artistry. A locomotive built at the Krupp Works is not just a powerful machine. Its brass fittings are polished to a mirror shine. Its lines are sleek and aesthetically pleasing. A camera from Gina is a masterpiece of optical engineering. But its body is also a beautiful object, designed to feel good in the hand. This fusion of Prussian technical rigor with Viennese craftsmanship creates products that dominate the high-end global market. Made in Germany becomes a hallmark not just of quality, but of a unique synthesis of art and industry. This symbiosis runs deeper into the realms of science and philosophy. The German university system, already the world's best, reaches a new zenith. The traditional Prussian approach to science was deeply empirical, materialistic, and focused on practical application. Now, this is tempered by the more holistic philosophical and theoretical traditions of Vienna and the South. You sit in on a lecture at the University of Berlin. The professor is a physicist discussing the strange new world of quantum mechanics. In our timeline, the early debates were starkly divided between experiment and theory. Here, the professor, a man from Munich who studied in Berlin, moves seamlessly between the two. He describes the hard experimental data with Prussian precision, but then explores the profound philosophical implications, the questions of causality, reality, and observation with a speculative daring that is distinctly Viennese. This cross-pollination accelerates discovery. German scientists are not just excellent technicians, they are profound thinkers, and they lead the world in the revolutionary new fields of relativity, quantum physics, and psychology. The new psychology, in particular, could only have been born in this specific crucible. The rigorous, clinical methods of Prussian medicine are combined with the deep introspection and philosophical curiosity of Vienna. Men like Freud and Jung still do their pioneering work, but their ideas are not confined to a small circle of intellectuals. They are discussed and debated within a broader cultural context that values both the rational and the spiritual, the observable and the intuitive. The talking cure becomes a respectable practice, integrated into the new, state-sponsored public health system, a system born from the Catholic bloc's commitment to Christian social teaching. In the arts, the effect is explosive. The raw, often angry, expressionism that arose in our timeline's pre-war Germany is moderated. The artistic energy is still there, but it is channeled into works of breathtaking grandeur and technical perfection. You attend the premiere of an opera by a composer named Richard Strauss. The music has the immense orchestral power and intellectual rigor you would expect from a German composer. but it is also filled with a lyrical, melodic beauty and a sheer love of life that feels profoundly Austrian. The state, flush with tax revenues from its booming economy and guided by the South's belief in cultural patronage, pours money into the arts. Every major city has a state-of-the-art opera house, multiple symphony orchestras, and vast public museums. Culture is not a luxury. It is seen as an essential pillar of the state, a source of national identity and pride, as important as the army. Even politics finds a new equilibrium. The old antagonism between the Prussian militarists and the Southern Catholics has not vanished, but it has softened into a productive tension. The government is a permanent coalition, a grand compromise between the forces of industry and the forces of tradition. The state pioneers a unique model of capitalism. The industrialists of the North are given a free hand to innovate and expand, but they are also bound by a social contract heavily influenced by Catholic teaching. You see the result in a factory town in the Ruhr Valley. The steel mill is a model of efficiency, but next to it stands a clean, well-built village for the workers, complete with a church, a school, and a community hall, all co-funded by the company and the state. This is the Christian socialism that emerged after the long peace was secured, a system that combines dynamic capitalism with a strong social safety net and a sense of communal obligation. It successfully blunts the appeal of revolutionary Marxism, creating a working class that is patriotic, productive, and largely content. This new Germany is a nation of immense confidence. It leads the world in science, in music, in philosophy, in industry. It has achieved a level of internal social cohesion and cultural brilliance that is unprecedented. But there is a subtle danger in this golden age. The very success of the Symbiosis creates a sense of exceptionalism, a belief that Germany has solved the fundamental problems of modernity that still plague other nations. They see the class conflict in Britain, the political instability in France, the revolutionary chaos in Russia, and they feel a quiet sense of superiority. Their unique fusion of steel and spirit, of Protestant drive and Catholic tradition, of industrial power and high culture, seems to them not just a German achievement, but the perfected model of civilization itself. This self-assurance is not aggressive or militaristic. It is a calm, deep-seated belief in their own cultural supremacy. They do not need to conquer the world with armies. They believe they are already conquering it with their ideas, their products, and their art. The symbiosis of steel and spirit has created a titan, but a titan that is becoming increasingly convinced of its own infallibility. The long peace has given Germany a golden age, but it has also shielded it from the harsh lessons of failure and doubt that shape more ordinary nations. The golden age of Berlin and Vienna, the confident hum of German industry, the lofty debates in its universities, all of this rests on a foundation of managed stability. But now you must travel away from the heart of the empire, back to its frayed and troubled edges. The year is 1912. The shattered periphery that was created in 1867 has not healed. It has festered. For decades, Germany has successfully managed the chaos through its overwhelming economic power, treating the Balkans and the remnants of old Cisleithania as a vast economic backyard. But now, the chickens of history are coming home to roost. The low-level ethnic strife and nationalist fervour have begun to boil over, fueled by the one power Germany cannot fully control: Russia. Germany is about to discover that an economic empire is not immune to the politics of identity and the call of blood. It is about to be drawn into the Balkan quagmire. You are in Belgrade, the capital of the Kingdom of Serbia. It is a city that lives and breathes a feverish dream of nationalist expansion. In every coffee house, maps are spread out showing a Greater Serbia that encompasses Bosnia, much of Croatia, and even parts of southern Hungary. This dream is fueled by Russia. The Russian ambassador is the most popular man in the city. He funds nationalist societies like the Black Hand. He funnels weapons to Serbian army units. And he fills the newspapers with pan-Slavic rhetoric. Russia, having been checked in the Far East by Japan and blocked in the Near East by Germany's diplomatic coup in Jerusalem, has concentrated all its frustrated imperial energy on the Balkans. It is its last best hope for expanding its influence in Europe. Its strategy is simple: to use Serbia as a proxy to undermine German and Hungarian authority in the region, and to create a crisis that will force Germany into a confrontation. The immediate flashpoint is Bosnia. The condominium, jointly administered by Germany, Hungary, and a phantom Ottoman presence, is a mess. Germany's interest is purely economic, the mines and forests. Hungary's interest is administrative, preventing the region from becoming a base for South Slav nationalism. But on the ground, a Serbian-funded insurgency has begun. You witness the aftermath of a bombing at a German-owned timber mill. The local Hungarian gendarmerie is overwhelmed. They are seen not as peacekeepers, but as oppressors. The German engineers and managers write frantic letters back to Berlin, demanding protection. The crisis extends to Hungary itself. The independent Hungarian state, deprived of Austrian resources, has struggled to manage its own multi-ethnic population. In Croatia, the government in Budapest's heavy-handed Magyarization policies have backfired spectacularly, creating a powerful separatist movement. Some Croats look to Serbia, but the more devoutly Catholic majority dreams of its own independent state, or even of rejoining a German sphere as a protected Catholic kingdom, anything to escape the rule of the Hungarians. The Hungarian government, weak and paranoid, responds with crackdowns, which only fuel the cycle of violence. They constantly appeal to Berlin for aid, for loans to fund their army, for diplomatic support against Serbia. And in Bohemia, the situation is one of perpetual, low-grade political warfare. The Czech majority in the Prague Diet constantly passes legislation to frustrate the German-speaking minority. The German government in Berlin is forced to intervene repeatedly, using its authority as the protecting power to veto laws and mediate disputes. It feels like trying to referee a domestic squabble that never ends. Every intervention is resented by the Czechs as an act of imperial arrogance and hailed by Russia as another example of Teutonic oppression of a brother Slav. Germany's response to this growing chaos is, at first, to do what it does best: apply economic pressure. When the Serbian government is caught funding the Bosnian insurgents, Berlin and Vienna, which now acts in concert with Berlin on foreign policy, impose crippling sanctions. They close the border to all Serbian agricultural exports, the lifeblood of the country's economy. This is the pig war of our timeline, but on a much larger scale. The Serbian economy is strangled, but this time Russia steps in. It provides massive loans to the Serbian government to keep it afloat and arranges for Serbian exports to be shipped through the Black Sea. The economic weapon, for the first time, has failed. Russia is willing to pay an enormous price to keep its proxy in the game. This forces a major debate in the Reichstag. The old Prussian conservatives and the industrialists with assets in the region demand a military response. A quick, punitive expedition to chasten Serbia and restore order in Bosnia. But the Catholic-led government is deeply reluctant. They are the party of the long peace, the architects of the cultural golden age. Their constituents are not interested in a Balkan adventure. The Austrians and Bavarians have no love for the Serbs, but they have even less for the arrogant Hungarians, whom they resent for having broken away from the empire. Why should German soldiers, they ask, die to prop up a failing Hungarian state and to police a region of intractable, ancient hatreds. The Chancellor chooses a middle path. No direct military intervention. Not yet. Instead, Germany will dramatically increase its financial and military aid to Hungary, enabling it to modernize its army to deal with the Serbian threat. And it will deploy a larger force of German advisors and gendarmes to Bosnia to protect its economic interests. It is a policy of escalation, but a cautious one. It is an attempt to manage the quagmire without being completely submerged in it. You are at a railway station in Munich. A train is departing for the south. It is filled with young German officers and engineers, bound for Hungary and Bosnia. They are not going to a declared war, but they are heading into a conflict zone. They are confident, products of the Golden Age, convinced of their own superiority. They see this as a simple policing action, a matter of bringing order to a backward region. They do not understand the depth of the hatreds they are stepping into. They do not realize that they are no longer just bankers and engineers. They are now active participants in the Balkan quagmire. Germany, the stable, peaceful hegemon, is being dragged into a conflict it does not want, in a place it does not truly value, by the machinations of a weaker but more reckless rival. The long peace of Europe is not going to be shattered by a clash of titans on the fields of France. It is being slowly, inexorably poisoned by a low-grade, persistent infection in its own backyard. The systems and strategies that built Germany's economic empire are proving inadequate to deal with the raw, irrational and powerful force of ethnic nationalism. The hegemon is discovering the limits of its power. The date is June 28th, 1914. The sun is hot in Sarajevo, the capital of the Bosnian condominium. Plate: the sun is hot in Sarajevo. The city is a tense tapestry of cultures. The domes of mosques, the spires of Catholic and Orthodox churches, and the severe, administrative buildings of the German and Hungarian authorities. On this day, a Habsburg Archduke, Franz Ferdinand, is visiting the city. In our timeline, he was the heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, a figure of immense political significance. Here, his role is different. The Habsburgs are no longer emperors, but king archdukes of Austria, the premier but subordinate royal house within the German Reich. Franz Ferdinand is not the heir to an empire, but a high-ranking royal, a cousin of the German Kaiser, and the Inspector General of the German forces in the southern territories. His visit is a tour of inspection, a symbol of Germany's commitment to stabilizing the chaotic province. The events of the day unfold with the same terrible, tragic sequence you remember. A bomb is thrown at the motorcade and misses. The Archduke and his wife, Sophie, insist on visiting the wounded in the hospital. A wrong turn is taken by their driver, and the car stalls on a street corner, directly in front of a young Bosnian Serb nationalist named Gavrilo Princip. He steps forward, raises his pistol, and fires 2 shots. The Archduke and his wife are fatally wounded. In our world, this act lit the fuse of the July crisis. An ultimatum from Vienna to Belgrade, a series of interlocking alliances, the mobilization of millions of men, and the start of the Great War. It was the spark that ignited a global powder keg. But here, as the news flashes across the telegraph wires to Vienna, and then to Berlin, the reaction is profoundly different. The keg is not primed to explode. The context, the players, and the calculations have all been changed by the 50 years of history that have diverged from our own. You are in the Chancellor's office in Berlin. The news is received with shock and outrage, of course. A member of the imperial family has been murdered by terrorists. But there is no panic. There is no immediate cry for war. The Chancellor, a pragmatic Bavarian from the Centre Party, convenes an emergency meeting of the cabinet. The first voice you hear is not that of a general, but that of the finance minister. He speaks of the cost, a full-scale war with Serbia, which would inevitably mean a war with Serbia's protector, Russia, would be ruinously expensive. It would disrupt the intricate web of trade and investment that constitutes Germany's informal empire. It would require a massive tax increase, which would be deeply unpopular. He calmly points out that the German economy is built on peace and stability, not conflict. Next, the foreign minister speaks. He has already been in contact with the ambassadors in Paris and St. Petersburg. The French have expressed their condolences, but have made it privately clear that their alliance with Russia is defensive. They will not support a Russian adventure in the Balkans, especially one provoked by Serbian nationalism. They see the assassination for what it is, a regional crime, a tragedy, but not a casus belli for a continental war against an unbeatable Germany. The Franco-Russian calculation of impotence, made years ago, holds firm. Russia, they know, will protest, will threaten, will bluster. But without the certainty of French involvement, will it risk a single-handed war against the German Leviathan? The foreign minister's assessment is that it will not. Finally, the Minister of War, a Prussian but a realist, gives his assessment. He confirms that Germany can crush Serbia with ease. It can likely defeat Russia as well, though at a significant cost. But he asks the crucial question: to what end? What is the strategic objective? To occupy Serbia? To annex it? This would only saddle Germany with millions more hostile Slavic subjects, creating a permanent insurgency. To destroy the Serbian state? This would create a power vacuum that Russia would seek to fill for the next 100 years. From a military perspective, a full-scale war is a messy, costly, and strategically pointless exercise. The conclusion in the room is unanimous and reached with cold, dispassionate logic. This is not a matter of national honor that requires a world war. It is a policing matter. It is a security problem in a troublesome border province. The outrage is real, but it is directed at the Serbian state, seen as a rogue actor, a sponsor of terrorism. The question is not if Serbia should be punished, but how to do so in a way that is swift, effective, and most importantly, limited. The famous blank check of our history is never written. The Kaiser, Wilhelm II, is furious. His monarchist sensibilities are offended, and his initial reaction is to demand a swift and total war. But he is no longer the supreme warlord of our timeline. He is a powerful figurehead, but he governs with a parliament and a chancellor who control the budget and who represent a southern constituency that is profoundly skeptical of Prussian militarism. His ministers calmly and firmly talk him down. They present the facts. A war would be bad for business, strategically pointless, and diplomatically unnecessary. They propose a different course of action. A message is sent from Berlin to the Hungarian government in Budapest. It is not a blank check, it is a set of carefully defined parameters. Germany will support Hungary in taking punitive action against Serbia. It will provide logistical support, intelligence, and a massive financial aid package. It will mobilize a significant portion of its own army on the Russian border to act as an overwhelming deterrent, making it clear to the Tsar that any intervention will be met with devastating force. But it authorizes only a limited military operation. The objective is not the conquest of Serbia, but its chastisement. The Hungarian army is to cross the border, destroy the main Serbian military formations, dismantle the terrorist networks like the Black Hand, and then withdraw. It is to be a punitive expedition, not a war of annihilation. This response is a direct product of the world this timeline has created. Germany is so powerful that it does not need to gamble everything on a preventative war. Its leaders have the confidence to act with restraint, to treat the crisis as a regional problem that can be solved with a calibrated application of force. They are not haunted by the fear of a rising Russia, because in their world, Russia is permanently checked. They are not bound by a fragile alliance with a collapsing Austria-Hungary that requires them to be reckless. They are the senior partner, the hegemon, and they can dictate the terms of the response. In Sarajevo, the bodies of the Archduke and his wife are placed on a train for their long journey home. The city is locked down, a grim silence falling over its streets. The assassination, which in our world was the single event that tipped the continent into a 4-year cataclysm, here becomes something else. It is a catalyst not for a world war, but for a regional reckoning. The reaction is one of cold calculation, of risk management, of a great power deciding, with absolute self-assurance, that it can handle this problem without turning the world upside down. The long peace is about to be broken, but it will not be shattered. It will be punctured by a sharp, brutal, and carefully contained act of state-sanctioned revenge. The late summer of 1914, a tense quiet hangs over the great capitals of Europe. The diplomatic notes have flown, the ultimatums have been delivered and rejected. In Belgrade, the Serbian government, confident in Russian support, has refused the Hungarian demand to allow its police to operate on Serbian soil to dismantle the Black Hand. In St. Petersburg, the Tsar has ordered a partial mobilization, a rattling of the saber meant to intimidate. In Paris and London, diplomats watch and wait, praying that the German giant remains calm. And in Berlin, the giant is not calm, but it is deliberate. The time for calculation is over. The time for the punitive expedition has begun. You are on the south bank of the Danube River, across from Belgrade. The fields of Hungary are filled not with German soldiers, but with the soldiers of the Royal Hungarian Honved. Their equipment, however, is brand new. Their rifles are the latest Mausers. Their artillery is the heavy, brutally efficient ordnance of the Krupp works, and their movements are coordinated by a cadre of German staff officers, operating from a command train a few miles behind the front. This is Germany's chosen method: to use a proxy army, backed by its own industrial might, and deterred by its own immense military shadow. As dawn breaks, a sound like rolling thunder echoes across the plain. It is the German-made heavy artillery opening up on the Serbian forts around Belgrade. The bombardment is short, precise, and terrifyingly destructive. Within hours, the main defensive positions are silenced. Then, under the cover of the guns, the Hungarian assault troops, trained in new German stormtrooper tactics, cross the river. Belgrade falls in less than 3 days. It is a shocking display of modern industrialized warfare, but on a contained and limited scale. The main objective, however, is not the capital. The bulk of the Hungarian army, with German logistical support ensuring a steady flow of shells and supplies, pushes south into the heart of Serbia. The Serbian army, brave and battle-hardened from the Balkan Wars, puts up a fierce resistance in the mountainous terrain, but they are hopelessly outmatched. Their artillery is antiquated, their supplies are low, and they are facing an army that has been comprehensively modernized by the greatest industrial power on earth. The war is not a glorious series of cavalry charges, but a brutal, methodical grinding down. The Hungarians advance, they encircle, they destroy. Meanwhile, the real drama is unfolding hundreds of miles to the northeast, on the border between German East Prussia and Russian Poland. Here, the German Imperial Army has mobilized nearly 1 million men. It is a silent, overwhelming show of force. They do not cross the border. They simply stand there, a wall of steel and disciplined manpower, a physical manifestation of the strategic reality that has governed Europe for decades. You are at a German command post overlooking the vast, flat expanse of the Polish plain. Through field glasses, you can see the Russian patrols on the other side. There is an almost surreal lack of tension. No shots are fired. It is not a front line. It is a demonstration. In St. Petersburg, this demonstration creates panic in the Tsar's court. The partial mobilization, intended as a threat, now looks like a suicidal blunder. The generals report that the Russian army is in no condition to fight the Germans. Their mobilization is slow and chaotic. They lack heavy artillery, machine guns, even basic supplies like boots and rifles for all their men. To attack Germany would be to march an entire generation into a meat grinder. The Tsar's advisors plead with him. The French have made it clear they will not join an offensive war. The British are urging restraint. Russia is alone. This is the moment of truth for the Tsar. To intervene in Serbia now means a single-handed war with Germany, a war that every sane advisor tells him he will lose catastrophically. To do nothing means a humiliation of historic proportions. It means abandoning his Serbian allies, the cornerstone of Russia's Balkan policy. It means exposing the hollowness of his pan-Slavic rhetoric. It means a devastating loss of face, both internationally and, more dangerously, at home, where revolutionary forces are already gathering strength. With a heavy heart, Nicholas II makes his choice. He chooses survival. The order is given for the Russian army to stand down. A diplomatic note is sent to Berlin. It is a masterpiece of face-saving language, protesting the brutal violation of Serbian sovereignty in the strongest possible terms, but concluding that, in the interests of preserving the general peace of Christendom, Russia will not intervene militarily, but will instead seek redress through international arbitration after the fact. Everyone knows what this is. A surrender. The news is a thunderclap across Europe. The Russian bluff has been called, and its hand was empty. In Paris, there is quiet relief mixed with contempt. In London, the government congratulates itself on its wise neutrality. And in Berlin, the news is greeted not with wild celebration, but with a grim, sober satisfaction. The strategy has worked. The punitive expedition can proceed without risk of escalation. In Serbia, the war lasts just 6 weeks. The Serbian army is broken, its remnants retreating into the mountains of Albania. The Hungarian army occupies the northern half of the country, including Belgrade. And then, as promised, they stop. German diplomats arrive in the occupied capital and dictate the terms of peace. It is a harsh peace, but not an annihilating one. Serbia must formally disband the Black Hand and all other nationalist societies. It must accept Hungarian liaison officers within its government to ensure compliance. It must pay a substantial indemnity, and it must formally renounce any and all claims on Bosnia. But the Serbian state is allowed to survive. The monarchy is preserved. The occupation is to be temporary. The goal was chastisement, not conquest, and the terms reflect that. By Christmas of 1914, the Hungarian troops are beginning to withdraw. The punitive expedition is over. Europe has stepped to the brink of the abyss and then, guided by the cold logic of overwhelming power, it has stepped back. There has been a war. A short, brutal, modern war, but it has remained a Balkan affair. Tens of thousands are dead, a nation has been humbled, and an empire has been humiliated. But the continent has been spared. The general cataclysm, the consequences of this 6-week war are immense. Russia is exposed as a paper tiger, its prestige shattered. The Tsar's regime is fatally weakened, the humiliation providing potent ammunition for his Bolshevik and liberal opponents. The German-Hungarian alliance is solidified, with Budapest now more dependent than ever on Berlin. The South Slav nationalist movement is dealt a devastating blow, and Germany's position as the undisputed hegemon of Europe is cemented beyond all doubt. It has demonstrated not only its immense strength, but also its capacity for restraint. It has shown that it can use its power like a scalpel, not just a sledgehammer. But in humbling Russia so completely, it has also sown the seeds of a deep and bitter resentment, a desire for revenge that will now smoulder in the heart of the Russian political and military establishment for years to come. The Great War has been averted, but the peace that follows will be a cold one, defined by the shadow of this brief, decisive, and deeply consequential conflict. You are floating, not in water, but in the air, suspended in a state of serene, almost silent, forward motion. Below you, the patchwork of the French countryside glides by, the fields of Normandy rendered in miniature. You are aboard the LZ-20 Europa, the flagship of the German airship transport company, the Deutsche Luftschiffahrts Aktiengesellschaft, or DELAG. The year is 1922. The world, having been spared the cataclysm of a great war, has followed a different technological path. The immense industrial capacity and engineering genius that, in our world, was funneled into tanks, fighter planes, and bombers, has instead been directed towards a more peaceful and, in many ways, more romantic ambition: the conquest of the skies by the dirigible. The punitive expedition of 1914 was a brutal but brief affair. It did not create the insatiable demand for military technology that the Great War did. The airplane, a fledgling invention in 1914, remains a novelty in this world, a toy for hobbyists and a tool for reconnaissance. But its development is slow, starved of the massive government investment it received in our timeline. The real prestige, the focus of national pride and engineering prowess, has centered on Count Ferdinand von Zeppelin's magnificent creations. The interior of the Europa is not a cramped fuselage but a flying luxury hotel. You are in the main dining salon, a vast space with panoramic windows offering breathtaking views. Waiters in crisp white jackets serve a 5-course meal on fine Meissen china. The quiet hum of the Maybach engines, housed in nacelles far from the passenger gondola, is a gentle background murmur. There is no turbulence, no violent vibration of an internal combustion engine, only the smooth, majestic procession through the heavens. This is the age of the dirigible, and it is a German age. With no great war to interrupt their progress, and with the immense resources of a peaceful and prosperous Reich behind them, German companies like Zeppelin and Schutter-Lanz have perfected the rigid airship. By the early 1920s, they have established a network of regular, reliable passenger and cargo routes that crisscross Europe and are beginning to stretch across the oceans. One can travel from Berlin to Rome overnight, or from Hamburg to London in a matter of hours, arriving in city centre terminals, not remote airfields. This has a profound effect on culture and commerce. The European elite becomes more integrated than ever before. Businessmen from Lyon can attend a morning meeting in Frankfurt and be home for a late dinner. Aristocrats from Vienna can weekend in Paris with an ease their parents could never have imagined. This effortless, elegant travel fosters a sense of a shared European identity, albeit one dominated by German technology and capital. The airship is the symbol of the long peace, a tangible expression of a continent connected and at ease, floating serenely above the old earthbound hatreds. The technology itself is a direct product of the German cultural synthesis. The duralumin framework of the airship is a marvel of Prussian lightweight engineering. The gas cells are a masterpiece of German chemical science, and the powerful, Reliable engines are the pinnacle of its mechanical genius. But the design of the passenger spaces, the comfortable cabins, the elegant salons, the Art Deco stylings, owes everything to the Austrian tradition of luxury, comfort, and aesthetics. The airships are flying examples of the symbiosis of steel and spirit. The German government, seeing the immense prestige and strategic value of this new industry, subsidizes it heavily. Great airship hangars, colossal structures like secular cathedrals, are built in every major German city. Helium, a rare, non-flammable gas, is discovered in large quantities in the oil fields of German-dominated Mesopotamia. While other nations must still rely on dangerous hydrogen, Germany gains a near monopoly on this vital strategic resource, making its airships not only the most advanced, but also by far the safest. The fiery disaster of the Hindenburg, which in our world helped to kill the airship era, is an inconceivable event in this timeline of helium-filled German dominance. You are at the global airship nexus, the new intercontinental air harbour outside Berlin. It is a bustling city dedicated to lighter-than-air travel. You see the LZ-25 Orient being prepared for its weekly 5-day journey to Baghdad, a crucial link in Germany's land-based empire. You see the sleek, new LZ-30 Atlantic, the first of the superdirigibles designed for the challenging but potentially lucrative transatlantic route to New York. American businessmen, eager to tap into the stable European market, are a common sight in the terminal's first-class lounge. The geopolitical implications are subtle but significant. Great Britain, the master of the seas, finds its dominance quietly challenged. For centuries, the Royal Navy controlled the world's trade routes. Now, Germany can float over them. High-value, low-weight cargo mail, pharmaceuticals, luxury goods, crucial industrial diamonds is increasingly shipped by air, bypassing British-controlled ports and sea lanes. Britain still rules the waves, but Germany is beginning to rule the sky. There is no open hostility, but a new arena of competition has been opened. This technological path also reinforces Germany's sense of its own unique, superior path. While other nations tinker with noisy, dangerous airplanes, Germany has perfected a form of travel that is silent, elegant, and civilized. The dirigible becomes a metaphor for the German state itself. Vast, powerful, quiet, and moving inexorably forward on a path of peaceful progress. It is a symbol of a different kind of modernity, one less defined by speed and brute force, and more by grace, comfort, and technical sophistication. Of course, the military applications are not ignored. The German Army and Navy maintain a fleet of observation and patrol airships, the eyes of the Reich. They can loiter for days over the North Sea or the vast plains of Poland, providing a surveillance capability that is unmatched. But their offensive potential is limited. They are too slow, too vulnerable to weather and ground fire to be the kind of decisive weapon that the bomber would become. Their primary role is strategic, not tactical. They are a tool of deterrence and control, not of blitzkrieg. As you stand on the observation deck of the Europa, watching the lights of Paris emerge from the twilight haze, you feel the profound divergence. The 20th century of this world is not the century of the jet engine and the atom bomb. It is the century of the silent airship. It is a world that is more connected, but also more dominated by a single power. It is a world where technological progress has taken a grand, beautiful, and ultimately more gentle detour. The long peace has created a long age of the Zeppelin, a testament to a world that chose luxury over speed, serenity over the scream of a fighter plane. The sky is not a battlefield. It is a grand, open highway for the commerce and culture of a German-led Europe. You are in a vast public park in Essen, in the heart of the Ruhr industrial region. The year is 1928. In our timeline, this city would bear the deep scars of the Great War, the hyperinflation of the Weimar Republic, and the bitter political strife between communists and the rising Nazi Party. But here, the scene is one of tranquil prosperity. It is a Sunday afternoon. Families are picnicking on manicured lawns, children are playing in clean, safe playgrounds, and a brass band is playing Strauss waltzes in a magnificent cast-iron bandstand. This is the social landscape created by the long peace, but it is not a landscape without tension. With no great external enemy to unite the nation, the fundamental internal question of any industrial society has come to the forefront. The question of class, of the distribution of the immense wealth the empire generates. The force that brings this question to the table is the Social Democratic Party, the SPD. In our timeline, the SPD was torn apart by the Great War, splintering into factions over support for the conflict. Here, it has had 60 years of uninterrupted, peaceful growth. It is a massive, powerful, and deeply institutionalized force in German politics, commanding the unwavering loyalty of the industrial working class. They have deputies in the Reichstag, control city councils, and run a vast network of trade unions, workers' clubs, and newspapers. Their traditional ideology is orthodox Marxism. They believe in the inevitable class struggle, the overthrow of the capitalist state, and the establishment of a workers' paradise. However, the reality they face is very different from the one Marx predicted. The German worker of the 1920s is not an impoverished, desperate revolutionary. He is, by the standards of the day, remarkably well off. He likely lives in a clean, state-subsidized apartment. His children attend excellent public schools, and he is covered by a comprehensive system of health, accident, and old age insurance that is the envy of the world. He has a stake in the system. The revolutionary rhetoric of his party's platform feels increasingly disconnected from the reality of his life. This creates a profound ideological crisis and, ultimately, a transformation within the German left. The force that moderates and reshapes the SPD is the other great power in German domestic politics, the Catholic bloc. The Centre Party and its Austrian allies, having governed for much of the past 40 years, have woven their philosophy of Christian social teaching into the very fabric of the state. This philosophy is deeply anti-Marxist, rejecting its atheism and its doctrine of class warfare, but it is also profoundly anti-laissez-faire capitalist. It believes in the dignity of labour, in the concept of a just wage, and in the obligation of the state and of employers to care for the welfare of the community. You are witnessing a debate in the Reichstag between a fiery young SPD deputy from Berlin and a seasoned, thoughtful Centre Party minister from Bavaria. The SPD deputy delivers a classic Marxist speech, denouncing the factory owners as exploiters and calling for the nationalization of industry. The Bavarian minister's response is telling. He does not defend the factory owners in principle. Instead, he speaks of the social partnership. He agrees that labour has a right to a fair share of the wealth it creates. But he argues that this is best achieved not through revolution, but through cooperation and state-mediated compromise. He points to the works councils that have been established by law in every major factory committees of workers and managers, who jointly decide on issues of pay, safety, and working conditions. He speaks of the state arbitration boards that settle disputes, and of the massive public works, parks, libraries, swimming pools, the airship network funded by taxes on corporate profits. We are not enemies, he says, addressing the SPD benches directly. We are all Germans. The factory owner and the steel worker are partners in the great project of our nation. This message over years has a powerful effect. The SPD finds itself constantly outmaneuvered. Every time they demand a reform, the government seems to meet them halfway, co-opting their appeal. Demands for public housing are met with a massive state-led building program. Calls for better healthcare are answered with an expansion of the national insurance system. The revolutionary fangs of the socialist movement are slowly and systematically drawn by a paternalistic, conservative state that simply refuses to play the role of the cartoonish capitalist oppressor. This leads to the rise of a new faction within the SPD, the revisionists or Christian socialists. They argue that the party must abandon its outdated revolutionary dogma and embrace a path of gradual parliamentary reform. They propose a new synthesis, a fusion of socialist goals for economic equality with the Christian ethical framework of the ruling party. They argue that the state, as it exists, can be used as a tool to create a just society. It does not need to be overthrown, but rather captured and steered. By the late 1920s, this faction has become dominant. The SPD officially abandons Marxism in its party platform, a move that would have been unthinkable a generation earlier. They become a party of reform, not revolution, a loyal opposition that seeks to manage and improve the existing system, not to destroy it. German politics settles into a stable, two-bloc system. On the right, the Catholic conservative bloc, representing tradition, faith, and rural interests. On the left, the newly moderated Social Democrats, representing the urban working class and secular interests. They disagree, they debate, they compete fiercely for power in elections. But they both operate within a shared consensus that the German model of a socially responsible, state-guided capitalism is fundamentally sound. The political extremists who plagued the Weimar Republic find no purchase here. The communists are a tiny, irrelevant fringe, their revolutionary message falling on deaf ears among a prosperous and secure working class. On the far right, the Völkisch nationalist movements that grew out of the trauma of defeat in our timeline have no such trauma to feed on. Germany is peaceful, victorious, and proud. Anti-Semitism exists, as it does across Europe, but without the toxic narrative of a stab in the back to explain a lost war. It remains a social prejudice, not a powerful political movement. A failed artist from Austria, a man named Adolf Hitler, lives and dies in obscurity, his rants ignored by a public that sees no need for a radical savior. The long peace has created a gilded cage of a different sort. The German state is stable, prosperous, and peaceful. It has solved the problem of class conflict that is tearing other nations apart. But it has done so through a system of paternalistic control, of co-option, and of managed consensus. There is freedom, but it is a comfortable, well-ordered freedom. The radical impulse, the revolutionary dream, has been traded for security, a full belly, and a ticket for a Sunday excursion on a Zeppelin. The unfinished symphony of social revolution has been completed, but the final score was written not by Karl Marx, but by a committee of Bavarian politicians and socially minded Catholic bishops. You are in Vienna in the year 1930. The city is bathed in the soft light of a late autumn afternoon. This is not the tense, impoverished capital of a rump state, haunted by the ghost of a lost empire. This is the undisputed cultural and intellectual heart of the 90-million-person German Reich. The political machinery may reside in Berlin, the financial power may be centered in Frankfurt, but the soul of the empire now lives here, along the Ringstrasse, in the coffee houses and university lecture halls of the old Habsburg capital. The process that began with the appointment of the first Catholic Chancellor 40 years ago has reached its natural conclusion. The crucible has not just created a new alloy, it has cooled with its weight, settled decisively to the south. For decades, the long peace and the immense prosperity of the Reich have acted as a cultural magnet. Artists, writers, scientists, and philosophers from all over the German-speaking world, from Hamburg and Königsberg, as much as from Munich and Graz, are drawn to Vienna's unique atmosphere. It is a city that combines the immense resources of the German state with the old Habsburg tradition of intellectual patronage, leisure, and a certain philosophical melancholy that the bustling, pragmatic Berlin could never replicate. Berlin is where one goes to build an industry. Vienna is where one goes to ask why. Out of this unique environment, a new philosophical movement has emerged, one that is now shaping thought across the globe. It is known simply as the Vienna School. It is not a single, unified doctrine, but a constellation of thinkers who are wrestling with the great questions of the age from a new perspective. In our timeline, the dominant philosophical currents of the early 20th century were analytical philosophy in the Anglo-American world, and a rising tide of existentialism and political nihilism in a traumatized continental Europe. The Vienna School is something entirely different, a direct product of the German-Austrian synthesis. You are in a crowded university hall, listening to a lecture by the school's leading figure, a man named Ludwig Wittgenstein. In our world, he was a solitary, tortured genius, whose work influenced a very narrow school of logic and language. Here, his context is different, and so is his influence. He is still a brilliant logician, but his thought has been shaped by the cultural air of Vienna. He is not just talking about the limits of language. He is exploring the relationship between the rational and the ineffable, between what can be said and what must be shown. His philosophy is a fusion of Prussian analytical rigor with a profound, almost mystical Austrian sensibility. He argues that the world of science, of facts, of the great German industrial machine, is only half the picture. The other half, the world of ethics, of aesthetics, of faith, of meaning, cannot be spoken of in logical propositions, but it is just as real, and ultimately, more important. This idea resonates deeply within the culture of the Reich. It provides a philosophical justification for the symbiosis of steel and spirit. It affirms that the nation's identity is built on two pillars: the rational, organizational genius of the North and the spiritual, artistic soul of the South. This is not the angry, irrationalist philosophy that grew in the soil of a defeated Germany in our timeline. It is not a rejection of reason, but an attempt to place reason in a larger, more humane context. The Vienna School's influence spreads from the university to the wider culture. You see it in the arts. The stark geometric abstraction that was a feature of the Bauhaus movement in our world is here softened and enriched. Architects and designers in Vienna combine functionalist principles with ornamentation, with a love of beautiful materials, with a sense of history. They create buildings and objects that are both modern and deeply connected to a humanist tradition. You see it in the sciences. Viennese physicists are at the forefront of quantum mechanics, but they are also the ones who are most engaged in public debates about the philosophical and even theological implications of their discoveries. Science is not seen as a purely materialistic enterprise that debunks religion, but as another way of apprehending the deep and mysterious structure of the universe. And you see it in politics and society. The Christian socialist model, which has brought the empire such stability, is championed by the Vienna School as the practical application of their philosophy. It is a system that recognizes the material needs of humanity, the steel, but insists that these needs be met within an ethical framework that respects human dignity and community, the spirit. This intellectual movement also redefines Germany's relationship with the world. The old, aggressive Weltpolitik is a distant memory. The new German sense of mission is a cultural one. The Vienna School promotes a form of cultural exporting. The German state funds orchestras that tour the world, sponsors international scientific congresses, and translates the works of its philosophers into dozens of languages. The goal is not to conquer other nations, but to persuade them of the superiority of the German model, a model that seems to have solved the great modern dilemmas of class conflict, nihilism, and the alienation of industrial society. Germany sees itself not as a master race, but as a master teacher, a benevolent hegemon guiding the world toward a more civilized, more meaningful modernity. As you stroll through the Bergarten in the evening, you see students from America, Japan, and Argentina engaged in passionate debate in the cafes. They have come to Vienna to study, to absorb this new thinking. The city has become a new Athens, the intellectual capital of the world. But there is a profound irony in this success. The Vienna School's philosophy, born of the unique German-Austrian crucible, is so perfectly tailored to its own peaceful, prosperous, and stable society that it may be ill-equipped to understand a world that is not like itself. Its elegant synthesis of the rational and the mystical, of the material and the spiritual, has no answer for the raw, brutal, and irrational forces of revolutionary fervour that are beginning to stir in a humiliated Russia, or for the anti-colonial passions that are starting to awaken in Asia and Africa. The Vienna School is the crowning achievement of the long peace. It is the sophisticated, intellectual superstructure built upon a foundation of hegemonic power and domestic stability. It has given the German Reich a coherent and compelling story to tell about itself. But it is a story that presumes the rest of the world is willing and able to listen. The intellectual heart of the empire is brilliant, confident, and perhaps dangerously complacent. The year is 1936. You are standing on the grand Zeppelin field in Nuremberg, but there are no torchlight parades, no hypnotic rallies, no banners bearing swastikas. Instead, the field is the site of the German Empire's quinquennial exposition of progress. It is a festival of industry, culture, and peace. Vast airships, bearing the flags of nations from around the world, float majestically overhead. Pavilions showcase the latest marvels of German engineering, art, and science. The atmosphere is one of profound, unshakable self-confidence. This is the culmination of the long peace, the world created by the fateful decision of 1867. The German Reich stands as the undisputed hegemon of Europe, a superpower whose position seems as permanent and natural as the Alps. Its unique socio-political model, the synthesis of Prussian industry and Austrian social conscience, has produced 70 years of stability and prosperity. The class conflicts that have led to violent revolution in Russia and paralyzing strikes in Britain and France seem to have been solved here. The ethnic hatreds that still simmer in the Balkans are managed, contained by Germany's immense economic and diplomatic weight. The nation leads the world in almost every field of human endeavour, from quantum physics to orchestral music, from chemical engineering to philosophy. You see the German family of 1936 strolling through the exposition. They are well-fed, well-dressed, and well-educated. They look at the exhibits with a quiet sense of ownership. This is their world, a world of order, reason, and benevolent progress. They believe in the state. They trust their institutions, and they are proud of their nation's role as the stabilizing center of the civilized world. The old anxieties, the German angst, have been banished, replaced by a deep and abiding sense of security. This security is projected across the continent. France, its dreams of revanche long dead, has settled into a role as a junior partner, its cultural life deeply influenced by the Vienna School, its economy intertwined with Germany's. The United Kingdom, its naval supremacy unchallenged, but its industrial supremacy lost, maintains a posture of wary but respectful distance, a rival but not an enemy. The smaller states of Europe, from the Netherlands to the shattered periphery of the Balkans, exist within Germany's orbit. Their independence nominal, their economies dependent. The peace is not one of equals, but it is a peace nonetheless. It is stable, predictable, and for most, prosperous. Yet, as you look closer at this gleaming facade of progress and harmony, you can begin to see the fine cracks. The very success of the German model has created its own unique vulnerabilities. The first is a profound complacency. Having solved the great problems of the 19th century, the German establishment has become slow to recognize the new problems of the 20th. They are masters of a world of rational actors, of economic incentives, of diplomatic negotiation. They are ill-equipped to understand the new, more radical ideologies that are taking root in the soil of humiliation and poverty outside their sphere. Your gaze turns eastward, to the Soviet Union, as it is now called. The Tsar's humiliating stand-down in 1914 fatally weakened the regime, and the subsequent internal turmoil led to a Bolshevik revolution, much as in our timeline. But this Soviet Union is different. It is not the paranoid, expansionist state forged in the crucible of a world war and foreign intervention. It is weaker, more isolated, but its ideology is burning with a purer, more intense flame of resentment. Its entire national identity is built around a single narrative: the story of its humiliation at the hands of the German, capitalist, imperialist monster. It bides its time, building its industry in secret, nursing a fanatical desire for a future reckoning. German intelligence reports dismiss the Soviets as backward and inefficient, failing to see the deadly seriousness of their ideological commitment. And in the wider world, beyond Europe, new forces are stirring. In India, in China, in Africa, anti-colonial movements are growing, inspired not by the harmonious philosophy of the Vienna School, but by the raw, empowering ideologies of nationalism and, increasingly, of Soviet-style communism. Germany, with its informal economic empire, believes it is immune to this, but its prosperity is deeply dependent on the stability of a global order that is beginning to fray at the edges. The central question of this world, as the 1930s draw to a close, is a subtle one. It is not, will there be a war? The answer to that seems to be a firm no. The power of the German bloc remains insurmountably strong. The new question is about the nature of progress itself. The German Reich has achieved a perfect equilibrium. It has balanced capital and labor, state and church, industry and culture. It has created a society that is, by almost any measure, a stunning success. But is a perfect equilibrium the end of history? Or is it a form of stagnation? The long peace has been a gilded cage. It has protected Germany and Europe from the horrors of a great war, but it may also have protected it from the painful, chaotic, but ultimately transformative forces of radical change. The incredible dynamism of the early 20th century in our world, the technological leaps spurred by war, the social revolutions, the shattering of old artistic and cultural forms, has been replaced here by a process of gentle, managed evolution. The final scene at the exposition is telling. As night falls, the entire fairground is illuminated by millions of electric lights, all powered by a single, vast, state-of-the-art power station. At the center of the field, a colossal projection screen shows a film celebrating the 70 years of the Reich. It shows the unification, the rise of industry, the smiling workers, the magnificent airships, the wise statesmen. The message is one of a symphony completed, a destiny fulfilled. But as you watch the serene, perfect images, you are left with a haunting question. What happens when a society believes its symphony is finished? What new music, perhaps dissonant and terrifying, is being composed, unheard, in the shadows just beyond the reach of the perfectly illuminated stage? The long peace has been won. The crucible has forged a new world. But no world is forever, and the greatest danger for a nation that believes it has all the answers is the sudden arrival of a question it has never thought to ask. The world we have walked through was born from a crucible. Not the crucible of fire and total war that forged our own 20th century, but a slower, cooler, political crucible that merged two competing visions of German identity. The Prussian eagle and the Habsburg double eagle were melted down and reformed into something new. This timeline chose the crucible as its narrative engine, and the world it produced is a testament to the profound consequences of that choice. It did not create a utopia nor a dystopia. It created a trade-off. The gain is undeniable. The long peace, the millions of lives saved, the cities not destroyed, the generation not lost in the trenches of a great war. This peace allowed for the organic fusion of Prussian rigor and Austrian grace, creating a society of immense cultural achievement, social stability, and technological elegance. It solved the violent class conflicts and nationalist frenzies of its age through a paternalistic, prosperous consensus. It achieved a form of gilded perfection. But what was the price of this perfection? The crucible archetype is about the creation of a new, synthetic whole. But the process of fusion can burn away impurities and vital essences alike. This new Germany, in achieving its perfect internal balance, lost its edge. Without the trauma of a great war to force radical innovation and painful self-reflection, it became complacent, convinced of its own singular virtue. The crucible forged a magnificent vessel, but one that was perhaps too rigid, too perfectly formed, to adapt to the new pressures brewing in the world outside. The timeline traded the violent chaos of our history for a serene, orderly, but perhaps ultimately fragile stability. It avoided the fever, but in doing so, may have lost the antibodies that the fever creates. This world is safer, calmer, and more beautiful than our own. But whether it is stronger is a question only its future could answer.